but it doesn't really.
And we're
Cool.
live. And I have to say, I love going live when in mid sentence so that the audience gets the barest hint of what the off camera conversation was before this 5 4 3 2 1 and we were live thing. It is Monday, August the 11th. It is the year of our Lord 2025. It is 8 o'clock a.m. It is Monday, and unlike a lot of people, Monday is my favorite day of the week. Um, and um, and someday we can talk about why that is, but not today, because today I have a very serious subject that I'm going to monologue about. Um, and I know you're thinking when Ben says it's a serious subject, what he means is it's not a serious subject, and he's going to pull this act of pretending to take something seriously that is, in fact, inane, particularly when he is holding a newly arrived Mrs.
I
Cactus.
was gonna say.
And Holly has the full cactus chorus. Along with the snowman, who can make the most serious things seem ridiculous. Um, but no, I actually have a very serious matter I want to talk about, which is uh, the announcement that there is going to be an Alaska summit, the response from President Zelensky, and the fact that Vladimir Putin is apparently actually coming to the United States. Um, uh, and I woke up in the middle of the night the other night when this was, and I saw on my phone the only alert, because it was like 3 in the morning, was that President Zelensky had responded. And I don't want to really talk about this. It's so inane and stupid and embarrassing for the country that the president is behaving this way. And I want to say to everybody who is making Munich comparisons, this is very unfair to Neville Chamberlain. And please read my column about why the comparison is unfair to Neville Chamberlain. If you Google the situation and Neville Chamberlain, I think it'll come right up. Um, I don't, that's not the aspect of it that I want to talk about. The aspect that I want to talk about is that in a fit of rage the other night at 3 in the morning, I impetuously released all the images of the special military operation about which I have not been talking because it involved a very unpleasant police action, and I disclosed in the context of releasing this material what a lot of you either know or have figured out or have expected, which is that all of the lasers, all my gear was seized by the park police during that operation, and that I have a court date as yet unscheduled, but at some time in the indeterminate future as a result of that activity. Um, and I want to say that I am still not able to tell the story of what happened that evening because it is, you know, potentially adverse to my legal interest to do so. I released the images anyway, but I'm going to follow on advice of counsel, not comment about it further at this time. Uh, Save to say that I'm very grateful for the outpouring of uh, support that has emerged in the days following it, mostly but not exclusively on social media. I will be highlighting some of that in today's dog shirt. Uh, a lot of people have asked if they can, if there's a GoFundMe to contribute to legal defense issues as well as to replacing the lasers. There is not, and I feel very strongly that there shouldn't be. I am more than capable of paying for my own toys, and I don't think uh, anybody needs to contribute to my midlife crisis. And moreover, uh, I have anticipated from the very first time that I did this that eventually I'm amazed that it took this long for it to produce um, a legal situation that I would need to deal with. It's been 3 years and I've never had a problem with the cops in any country. And if you, by the way, want to see what an interaction between me and the cops looks like, look at the video of my interactions with the police in Ottawa. The whole thing is videotaped. And so I've been anticipating that this would happen eventually, and I'm very at peace with it. And I am perfectly happy to pay my own legal bills. For everybody who is asking, the most important point is I do not want people to spend money trying to uh, assist me either with buying gadgets or with legal fees that they could be giving to actual Ukraine charities. So if you want to, and I really appreciate this, if you want to, um, donate to Razom or United for Ukraine, or Come Back Alive, or Rebirth Ukraine, my friends Seva and Marichka's project, and you want to do it in my name and Dog Shirt Daily's name and Special Military Operations name, that is lovely. But please give to organizations that are actually doing work on either Ukraine advocacy or direct Ukraine relief. Uh, my paying for the wages of my sins or virtues is my responsibility. The second thing I want to say about this is, and this has been by far the most moving part of this weekend's flood of response to this, and you should, if you haven't seen the Blue Sky response to it, check it out. It's actually pretty cool. But quite a number of people have said that they have asked me to write a kind of how-to guide about guerrilla protests and involving lasers in particular. And one of them posted this amazing operation that he did with a very non-laser in support of trans troops. People have been sort of sending me things that they've found inspired, that they tell me are inspired by these special military operations. So I am very moved by this, and I take the injunction to write a how-to guide about. I don't usually take reader assignments for what I'm going to write, but I take this very seriously, and I'm going to devote the entirety of uh, uh, the week on Dog Shirt Daily to writing about how to do this. And that will include things like what I'm writing today, which is sort of conceptual stuff about how to think about these guerrilla actions, to specific guidance about target selection, specific guidance about law, specific guidance about what kind of products can deliver what kind of responses, because these are, or what kind of results, because these are pretty expensive pieces of equipment, and you can misinvest even before the park police comes and seizes it all. And so for those of you who have no interest in laser projections or in guerrilla protests more generally, this might be a good week to skip the newsletter, which, people do anyway. And I know the data, like not everybody reads every dog shirt, which is, heartbreaking to me because pour my heart and soul into this. And then, Holly doesn't read it on time. No, I'm joking.
Oh, you cannot. Don't even go there in terms of who's reading whose newsletter.
I'm just taunting Holly. Um, uh, this may be a good time to skip it. I am trying to put together something that will be really useful for the people for whom it is, who are actually interested in getting involved in this. So all of which is an 11-minute long way of saying thank you to everybody who has written to me, in public or in private. I am not going to talk about the situation, different use of the word situation, until I'm in a position to do it without, you know, making shit worse. But I'm fine, and as both Alicia and Holly can tell you, I am not especially worried about this situation, and neither should you be. Um, and um, and I will keep people updated as I can. Um, which brings us to the fact that the sun is not shining. The birds are chirping, apparently, but it is, and in Washington, it is beautifully cool, although I understand there is a heat wave going on in Alicia's neck of the woods. I had the unusual experience of texting with Ev yesterday, in which she was complaining about the heat, and I was in a delightfully cool Washington summer day. And I just want to say to all of my Canadian friends, um, uh,
Very nice.
yeah, well,
They have conditioning up there.
well,
They
I'm
don't.
just saying I've spent so much time saying sorry de soleil to my Canadian friends that when the occasion arises to tease them about it being too hot up there, I am not going to pass it up. Anyway, um, it's going to be a great frickin' day. And I think the Cactus Chorus has something to say, including Mrs. Cactus, who showed up last night.
Okay.
You're watching Dog Shirt TV, a fucking revolution in morning television.
You are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a fucking revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features, of which there are many,
That the fake cacti keep proliferating.
is that we have cactuses who are multiplying like bunnies. And another one of the revolutionary features, of which there are many, is that sometimes we invite the great Anne Applebaum on the show to discuss her recent article in The Atlantic about Sudan, because we have this co host who happens to be a Sudan expert, and we have a great friend of the show who happens to have written a major Atlantic article about the subject. And Anne agrees to come on, and then gets very ill, and has to bag, and so doesn't show up completely legitimately, and will come on Wednesday instead. And we end up with instead a monologue about civil disobedience and how to do that sort of thing. And another one of the revolutionary features, of which, as I assure you, there are quite a number, is that Alicia Wanless will show up, and through that whole monologue will have this look on her remarkably expressive face that gives her away constantly, which is basically saying, why am I here? Um, what It says with Admiral Stockdale, who am I and what am I doing here? And all of that is a long-winded way of saying welcome back from vacation in with the Puffins, to Alicia. and we're not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed. We're not allowed to have Ann Applebaum on Monday, though we are allowed to have her on Wednesday. But we are allowed to have fellowship with one another, and with all of you. And thank you for all of the kind words this weekend. Folks, what is on your minds this morning, and what is on our agenda for discussion?
Well, first, I just want to share it's not quite the same as a civil disobedient or guerrilla protest, but I rarely paint my own nails, and I have painted them in the Ukraine flag, and I have a Ukraine ring, and I'm going to keep working on them because the lines are not straight, and I just happened upon the idea of using painter's tape to get the lines straight on the nail. And so I'm probably going to work on it even as we're speaking this
Well,
morning.
that's
But
lovely. And I just want to say about the nails, you can paint my nails in Ukraine colors anytime.
I'm going to
And
do it. I'm not very good at this, so
That's okay.
but
I'm
I've
not
got
very
painter's
good at
tape.
having my nails painted. And by the way, about the ring, that ring is
It's
made by the younger
That's
sister
right.
of
Mariska.
Marichka, whose younger sister I have never met, but is a teenager in Kiev who makes jewelry and sells it for. I don't know if she sells it internationally, but but um, those rings have spread around Washington as Marichka has um, brought them over and distributed them um, uh, as to people who are involved in Ukraine activism in one way or another. And so anytime you see the like little beaded ring in blue and yellow on a dog shirt connected person or a Ukraine connected person in Washington, know that those are handmade symbols of having been touched by Marichka at some point. Um,
Yeah, I bought her entire supply when I had coffee with her.
that's
Um,
awesome.
as
I
she
didn't know that.
Yeah, she basically just takes donations for them. So I this is an expensive ring, shall we say. Uh, and I will say that it holds up really well if I can endorse the craftsmanship because I have put this ring, I've basically rarely taken it off for the last like 3 months or so. And I've put it through quite a bit and it is still holding up quite well.
Holly,
Or
Alicia,
Alicia.
what is our agenda? What are our agenda items today? What do you guys want to talk about?
Surely Alicia has an idea.
I never have an idea. I come on here to
Oh,
be told I have to get cacti and I don't want cacti and make
No,
faces.
that is false. Not once has anybody told you you have
Well,
to
the
get a
it's pretty
chat. The
cactus.
core.
chat has been going on about the need to add cacti. I mean, and then I had to disclose that I've got one living in Putin's head. And then maybe you need to come up here and burn propaganda I collected over the years from Russia before it turned into a complete pariah state. But not
Yeah,
now because we've got a fire ban.
Oh.
mm, one thing that y'all don't know about Alicia is that, first of all, I have a cabin in the woods. Alicia lives in a cabin in the woods full time, and it is full of awesome propaganda from around the world with a particular focus on communist propaganda, although there is non-communist propaganda too. And so I imagine that someday um, you would have some, like, I don't know, treasure seekers wandering around the woods of rural Ontario, and they stumble upon this abandoned cabin, and they sneak in looking for treasures, and they find a great trove of uh, Soviet uh, weirdness, and some of it is really weird.
Wow. I mean, what's the weirdest that I have? I mean,
I have
I don't
fine.
know.
Russian
I just
stacking
remember
dolls that I bought in Moscow in 1990.
I just remember being in your house. It was really the only time I've been in your house, and just noticing that the stuff on shelves or hanging on walls was super interesting, and a lot of it was like here's the Vietnamese uh, Communist Party's what it has to say about blank. I don't know. Am I wrong? See? Like I'm not making this shit up.
I don't know. I mean, I try to diversify it. Sometimes it's hard, like going to Argentina and not really realizing that it was all around and super obvious because I was looking for a poster. The Finnish stuff that I was able to find was mostly drawings, like artists
And
that were commissioned as part of the effort during the Winter War.
see, Alicia does not just write a book about the information animal,
She
and
lives it.
she lives it.
She lives with
Um,
it.
We all live with it. It's
I
inescapable.
know, but some of us do it mindfully. um,
I
and,
mean, my
and with
interest
that,
started with propaganda, right? Like a lot of people, wondered how do leaders manipulate masses? And so things like propaganda and language engineering and nationalism, they were all interesting.
I need to read your book. Yeah, I did or I order it on Kindle. Although if I actually get to meet you in person, I will have to also get a hard copy. Um, but just quick thumbnail, like if I want to propagandize, like what are some good propaganda tips if I want to become a propagandist? She's like, stop it. You're no, this
she's
is a
like, "You're
dumb
hurting
question.
America."
She's like, you're breaking my brain because you're asking me to distill like decades of knowledge and study.
No, it's more like you're breaking my brain because I'm trying to figure out how an information environment can be healthy despite people like you asking questions like
What?
that.
Okay, Alicia, though, and then someone commented that a CIA analyst asking how to be a propagandist. Because, Andrew, the analysts don't do ops. I mean, most of the time. I may have assisted on a covert influence campaign at one time. But generally speaking, analysts are boring. I don't understand why people are still confused about this. I cannot emphasize to people enough
If you want
how
to
boring
understand,
and
if you want
CIA
to
analysts are.
understand Holly's life as an analyst, you have to watch 3 Days of the Condor, which is that's actually a thinly disguised depiction of Holly's life. And, you know, that you got your Robert Redford character is actually Holly, and the assassins burst in and start killing all his colleagues, and he goes from this mild-mannered Clark Kent-like analyst to a frazzled psycho killer in a very short period of time, and that's really just a depiction of Holly's career.
Yes, indeed. But back to Alicia's expertise. So, Alicia, and again, I apologize. I have not read your book, so I'm asking stupid questions. But is the best way to combat propaganda, is it a truth, like a fact checking, kind of like unveiling the truth, or do you have to do a counter propaganda campaign? Because, like, for instance, if you're advising the Democrats, who, by the way, need a lot of advice based on my amateur just observation, they need help, man. They can't, they're not winning this game. What do you tell them?
I don't tell them because the whole
Now you
book
sound like
isn't
a
really
CIA
about
analyst.
countering influence operations at all. I think that's a bit of I think that's the point of the book. Often what we're doing is looking for quick interventions to something that we don't like and with little understanding for how the system works. Now,
But it's an emergency, Alicia. We found
We have
a
to
bleeding
do
body.
something.
We found a bleeding body on the side of the road. We do not have a full, sterile surgical room. We have a needle and some thread and some duct tape and some, basic equipment. What do we do to save this patient?
it's 8:25 in the morning, and if you know anything at all about me,
It says
Holly,
leeches.
I will
Yeah.
be offering very little hope on the current situation, and in fact see
Yeah.
nothing but an escalating information competition that's probably going to get worse and end up in violent conflict. I'm sorry.
Oh, she is
I
sorry.
just I just want to say about this. I urged Alicia, as she will confirm,
Not to
to
answer these
make the
stupid
theme
questions.
of the book don't do something. Just don't try to do something, because Alicia's whole theory is that we go through these cycles of panic about different technologies, different influence strategies, and what we never do is slow down and study the environment itself and how it works and do basic research on the on of the sort that we did in the ecology movement. Um, so what I would say is, if the concern is a bleeding body on the street who's going to die in 5 minutes, Alicia is not a trauma surgeon, and she's not the person to who wants to do that, and she's also doesn't think she's skeptical that the other people who do race to the body and start performing surgery with threads are going to do more harm than good. Um,
Well, if the advice is to do nothing, I would say the Democratic Party is excelling at that. So,
I'm not advising anything, to be clear, including
sure.
what John Hawkinson is suggesting. I'm not saying that this should be escalated. What I'm saying is that I think that one party in this information competition has been aware that it has been partaking in an information competition for decades and has gone about very deliberately and systematically trying to make changes that would lead to the current situation because it believed that it was in an information competition, that its values were under threat, etc. And the other side woke up very, very late in this game and realized that it might be as well. And its instinct is going to be to engage further in that and to copy whatever has happened that their opponent has done and use the very same tools to do that. And that, from my experience, looking at historical case studies, leads to open conflict. I don't know where your comeback point is at this point. My concern is other ecosystems that are currently under threat and what kind of conditions they might be able to foster to avoid this.
Yeah.
all
Good
right.
fair point. So
It's
it's too
dark.
late.
I told you, dark.
It's
Don't
too
ask me
late
for
for us.
advice.
I mean, you're so right about, obviously you're right, just across the board, but you're so right about the one side kind of having a strategy and a, like this is all intentional, and the other side just being kind of like la di da di da, like it's America, it'll be fine. And now waking up to the tremendous damage.
I mean, again, some of the things that seem to need to be changed are so systemic and difficult. Like, I was looking at surveys recently about adults. So, apparently, across many democracies, including the UK, it was sitting at 37% of adults surveyed in the UK would be open to an authoritarian government because they feel that their economic needs are currently not being met and that politicians are not listening to their concerns or doing anything about it. And one of the things that strikes me on some of the left, which is like a broad category of actors, is that you can't just keep saying democracy's under threat. Like, you're going to have to offer some sort of a vision for what the future could be that people can get behind and want to be a part of. And I haven't seen that really articulated. I mean, there is this feel good, idealistic version of it, but in the face of what's happening, I don't think that that's going to be gaining much traction anytime soon.
Well, I will just say that there is role in life for the experimental trauma surgeon, and there is role in life for the Alicia Wanlesses of the world to say, have you considered washing your hands before you do that? Um, and um, and by the way, if you think that is a reference to nothing in particular, it is a very specific reference to a particular doctor who is in, actually it was in a maternity hospital where huge numbers of women were dying of septic infections, which was the norm in maternity hospitals. In And one doctor figured out that you could reduce maternal deaths to near zero
Wow.
if you
Wash your
just
hands.
had people wash their hands. And uh, that doctor, I believe, um, uh, was ridiculed and died in obscurity and poverty. But so, you know, there is a role in life for people saying, okay, there's a patient in front of me. We need to do something for her. Here's what we can do. And there's also a role in life for somebody to say, are you sure? And I can't remember the name of that doctor. I believe it was in Vienna in the 1840s, maybe 1860s, 70s. But the idea that you should get as close as you can to a sterile operating environment, literally operating environment, was something that had to be learned. It was not something that, you know, like we were all born knowing. And um, and it's of course really wrapped up in the germ theory of the development of the germ theory of disease, of microbial um, uh, infection being like a thing, um, and um, and so yeah, the people who were saying um, let's understand the environment in which we're operating, and here I'm using operating in a less literal sense, before we make dramatic interventions, even though there are a whole bunch of women in labor who, need medical attention right now before we figure out what an infection is. And I do think there's a role for that. And for the person who says, hey, can we wash our hands before we do the surgery? Um, and I think it's a healthy debate. It was a healthy debate then too. Um, and I am really all about the little things that I'm not saying don't cut her open and take the baby out. I am saying, like, can we figure out can you wash your hands before you do it? Interventions in our interventions look like. And that requires some theory about the environment in which you're operating. Like it requires you to say, oh, what if there are germs on my hands? What if there's a relationship between the septic infections that like 60% of these women are dying of? And the in the physical microbial environment, and there are these little things that you can do that make a difference. What if? And I just think we need to be, if like you take away one thing from Alicia's book, it's that we know so goddamn little about how this stuff works. We are in a way worse position than a 19th century physician. at a, poor women's maternity hospital in Central Europe. That's my thought, grim though it may be.
So
Grim.
Carol T noted that it was Semmelweis who did that. The other
And
thing
I may
is,
have many details of this wrong, and I'm because I made up all the facts that I didn't know for sure,
Which is
and
just what a
I
propagandist would.
was wanting to give credit where credit was due. I dropped the link from the Wikipedia page about him. The thing that was also interesting, because at that time, obviously men were doing all of these surgeries. They were very insulted that they were told that they should wash their hands moving from operation to operation, which was spreading the problem. And they thought that this was completely insulting because it suggested that they were dirty, and they rebelled against it. So there was no immediate change. So I think the other thing is that we also need to be open, especially in the feelings that we're having right now, which are so visceral, right? Like the situation is awful. And so then the response as we as humans is like we must react, we must do something. And I get that, but that also means that you're probably not reacting in the most strategic way. If your emotions are driving you to react instantly, you're in a back footing, you're reactive. And I think that's also where I'm coming from is that I get it. The situation's really grave, but you can't be strategic if you don't step back and see that wider picture to know what your options are for doing anything. That's not comforting for Americans right now.
can I also just say about Semmelweis in particular? And again, I had no idea we were going to be talking about this today, and so did not refresh any of my knowledge about Semmelweis, including his name, or where I think he was in Vienna, but I can't remember which Central European city he was in. I will. I do think one of the things I remember about this story is that this was an issue that only affected poor women in mass because hospitals at that time for maternity hospitals were something that no woman of means would ever go to. That these were, if you had enough money to, uh, be anywhere else, you would have a midwife at home. You would have, um, uh, and so this problem of rampant disease concentrated in a small area is something that actually did not like this is at its worst. We think of hospitalization as where medicine is good. Actually, this was an area that was concentrating bad shit that rich people could stay away from. And so the urge to not know what you're doing is at its best, at its highest, at its most intense when you're dealing with disposable people. Um, and
Well, let's also add that women have been treated as disposable for an awfully long time.
yes, but this is not just women, right? This is poor women, um, uh, many of them not married, many of them um, uh, um, in like this is concentrating a lot of societal prejudices in one place, and um, and the fuck it, I'll just do this because something
Mhm.
has to be done urge is really strong in that situation. And the pause, figure out how to mitigate harm, and wash your goddamn hands urge is, you know, like it's most important when you're dealing with situations in which you're thinking about people as potentially disposable.
I agree with that. Yeah. I know this is not at all what Alicia's book is about. And so apologies to Alicia for probably making a insulting connection. But can we bring this up for a month? Because I have been dealing for months, well, years really, with a lot of interpersonal situations where do you like my painter's tape now? So like
Yeah, you look faintly like Emile Bovy now,
yeah. Speaking of propagandists, um, yeah. So a lot of us in America these days are dealing with interpersonal situations where loved ones are deep into false information, and you just and have no, like, it doesn't even matter, for instance, that I worked for the CIA and they presumably know me as not a pedophile, horrible, evil person who's trying to overthrow the government. And I'm just trying to tell them that, hey, Russia is bad. Russia does manipulate elections all over the world. Of course, Russia tried to manipulate the 2016 election. Like, and I've read some of the intelligence, the classified report. I actually read that. And, let me tell you, like, this is the real deal. It's not like, it's not like a fiction. And that doesn't even, like, my credibility, even as someone who is related to them or their dear friend for many decades, it means nothing to them, right? So I don't know. I've read some books and social science and that that talks about, instead of a frontal, like, fact checking assault. I'm gonna have to put these down so I don't scare people. Um, that the correct thing is to sort of be ask sort of curious, probing questions and trying to get them to think about, what they believe, or so on and so forth. Um, I feel like if I feel like that, I see, this is a great example actually of what Alicia's talking about. I did not realize that that was the better strategy in the beginning. And so I did a lot of frontal assault for many years and continue to do that, quite frankly.
You didn't
And
wash your hands.
I didn't wash my hands. And now I feel like, anyway, I feel like it's kind of too late, so some of these relationships are just broken beyond repair. And I don't have anything to do with it. Some of them are hanging on, and we just don't talk about things like, politics or whatever. But it's, I don't know what you do when, like, you realize you've taken the wrong approach for a long time. Is it too late to take a better approach, or should you just leave it? Maybe you should just leave it. Anyone? Green.
Alicia is muted. If
Oh,
if you're trying to talk, you're muted, Alicia. Um,
I am muted. I was going to say, I mean, people who are specialists in personal relationships would be better at this. It strikes me that it takes an awful lot of patience and listening
yeah,
to be able to
yeah,
reach people who are far down a rabbit hole. And I
yeah.
mean, yes, asking more questions and instead of telling them what to think or fighting with them tends to have some better results. But again, the personality type that can do that, I think is probably pretty rare. I mean, I don't have the patience or skill to do that. I think the other thing too is that the
Yeah.
more that we have two communities cleaving into worldviews that are incompatible, the farther apart they come from each other, there's nothing that bridges them. And so I think one other area that we don't talk enough about and aren't fostering is mediation. Like, where are the
Mm.
mediators? Who are the people who can actually bring these people who are lost in these competitive worldviews back together? And I do think there's lots of people in the middle. I think it's really a question about how to reach them, but not reaching them in the way of hearts and minds and making them believe our point of view. I think there's this people in the middle that need to be given again, like some sort of a vision they can be a part of.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah.
Some of
Um,
it might actually
I
be.
also
So here's an area that I think is
I
often
also want
overlooked,
to
and the
say
whole
on this point.
disinformation world overlooked it.
I also want to say on this point that Alicia just in passing made a point that I think is very profound and is worth making more explicitly, which is, we group 100 different questions under the rubric of, you know, information environment or, toxic disinformation or whatever. But one of them is the field of analogizable, say, to public health or environmentalism, right? Like, what is the aggregate? What should we do in the aggregate about bad shit in the ecosystem, right? Pandemic disease. What do you do about pandemic disease? Another question is how do you treat an individual patient, right? How you treat somebody with COVID has almost nothing to do. It's a completely different professional discipline. This is medicine, not public health, right? You wouldn't put a bunch of epidemiologists on the question of how do you treat a patient with COVID. Think of Alicia as a proto epidemiologist in this field, right? She's not a clinician. And the difference between, if you ask an epidemiologist, how do I treat tuberculosis? I have a patient with tuberculosis, I need to do something, you know, like that's asking the wrong question to the wrong person. And we have not taught ourselves in this area that partly because there are so many flamboyant frauds out there who claim that their expertise in one corner of this constellation of problems entitles them to deference as an expert in 30 unrelated corners of the problem. We haven't learned to separate the problem of what to do with a person in your life who's, addicted to this stuff, which may be closer, honestly, to the question of what to do with somebody who's joined a cult or what to do with somebody who's has an addiction, right? But what to do about Facebook, conveying the mass of information is maybe almost an unrelated question, except that they interact with one another. Alicia, I'm curious whether you think I just grossly misrepresented things on this.
No, I mean, I think this is much of the problem is that you've got lots of different disciplines looking at a very narrow lens of it, hoping that they've got a silver bullet for solving a complex problem. And we're not necessarily connecting the dots between what can be learned across those and how it functions together. So, one place that I wanted to tell Holly to look is that it's far from perfect, but the countering violent extremism realm, it's well developed at this point. They had lessons learned in terms of some of the reasons why people end up leaving extremist groups. Some of it is because then they were exposed with hypocrisy. So there is an aspect of time in which maybe people are shown somehow just from their own experiences that there is a lot of hypocrisy happening in a current cult of personality. But also there's been some signs of hope in terms of like using sports to help people not go into lives of crime or extremism. There's also been evidence that people given some sort of channel to solve the immediate problems that are bothering them at a community level gives them an outlet for having constructive change that leads them away from extremist options. And so again, like it's not the places where we want to necessarily look because we want this one single answer that's going to address all of the problems, but it's incredibly complex.
Richard said in the chat, Alicia is talking about trust, and that's really at the root of all of this, whether it's on the interpersonal level or the societal level. I mean, what we're dealing with is, and trust is, at the heart. The bonds of trust are what hold civilized society together. Is money. We use money because we trust that it's real. We vote in the democracy because we trust the results. We let institutions do things because we trust those institutions. We listen to our neighbor about whatever issue because we trust their viewpoint or so. We listen to the doctor because we trust the doctor's expertise. And that's really it's actually what I've realized the last, 10 years is I mean, I've seen it in Africa how difficult it is to build trust from sort of the ground up. And actually, I have some disagreements with Anne's framing of Sudan, the Sudan conflict, actually, but I'll hold
Wait,
that.
hold that for Wednesday.
Oh, absolutely. I wasn't going to go there. I wasn't going to go there. But anyway, so I've seen, but what I've seen, in the last 10 years is just how fragile even 200 and some odd year old trust is, and how easily, it can unravel. And, and again, in my own personal life, just like how shocking it is to see people who know me personally, you know, and who know, that I've studied things and I've kind of, I have a lens on things that they don't have, and it just means absolutely nothing to them because they don't trust me for whatever reason. And some of that is probably my fault, my approach
I
to
mean, you
them.
do surround yourself with stuffed cactuses, Holly.
Well, there's that, but it's more than that. The way I've treated them, obviously, I feel like you have to take responsibility for, the erosion of trust in a relationship. It's a two-way thing, and I have to take responsibility for that. The way I've treated certain people in my life, I'm sure has eroded that trust. Maybe I've been too judgmental. I've been too condescending. I haven't listened well to them, and so on and so forth. And there might be good reasons for why I haven't done that, but I've contributed to that. So that's really what it is. And again, working on Africa, you see very vividly, when there's no trust, like it's very, very difficult to build, you know, and it builds on itself and it unravels it, on itself.
So I agree
Okay,
with that
first, Heidi,
completely. I think that, um,
I
hang on
respond to
just,
Heidi and Holly, by the way. I've been called Heidi my whole life. That's another
Holly,
whole
I
story.
know.
So,
I'm working with a Heidi, and the two of you are like my head this
yeah,
morning. I'm not very
the
clear.
English
I
names
already
are
once
confusing.
did it in my head, and I've done it out loud.
and
All I
and
wanted to say is that you're
also,
also operating it at a time.
go ahead, Alicia. I can't
This
tell if
it
Alicia
You're
is
operating in a
frozen.
time in which I'm delayed. I'm super delayed. So just pretend that we're talking internationally in 1985 and wait for me. You're also
I've never.
operating in a time in which expertise is being attacked, right? So anybody who is an expert, we're told not to trust. So not just the institutions, but anybody who has a PhD, anybody who went to academia. This whole idea that liberals have taken over all of these institutions means that people who are captured or at least believe that worldview aren't going to trust us by nature of where we've come from and what we've done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just to be clear, um, look, I agree with both of you. Trust is an essential part of the environment. And when and the United States is a very weird um, animal in this because it is a very low trust society historically. Um, Unlike, if you think of like Finland as the extreme high trust society, um, we're a society that is composed of regions and ethnicities that don't historically like each other very much. We have big religious differences, right? And the
Well,
whole found
based on the individual, like we're
right,
obsessed with the individual.
and the
So,
whole founding is rooted in a distrust of central government, and yet we have performed in certain areas at the level of a high trust society, um, partly because so much of our debates have been local. The nature of the structure, and Canada does the same thing in if you compare American and Canadian federalisms, they're different, quite different in important ways, but they have this feature in common, and they're very unusual in this regard. Um, that a lot of decisions that other countries make at the national level are made at the provincial or state and local levels, um, and are and so you have much higher trusts in levels of government that are closer to people, and this works in a deep, deep way in uh, American Canadian government. Well, now you nationalize every aspect of the entire conversation. So we have national debates about whether this particular school district should let trans kids be on their girls' teams, right? That is, you decide that at the national level, and you are going to make very acute people's lack of trust at um, remote decision making apparatuses, and you start to develop what I think is the same effect that you see in Europe, that everybody hates Brussels, right? And you might, I mean, not everybody, but there's a real resentment of centralized EU decision making that feeds, right wing populist parties as well as left wing populist parties. And I think we are at considerable risk of eroding the advantages of our federalism by nationalizing everything, which is where you have um, uh, these most intense low trust problems. And I don't mean to say that leave everything to the states and communities, because there's problems with that too. But I do think the more we do an all politics is national approach to things, the more you're going to get, you know, in Canada, truckers like movements, and in the United States, the feeling that, um, who gets vaccinated is for what is a decision that should be made at the extreme federal level.
Even the information environment has even eroded trust on the community level. Again, your family doctor that you've known for decades, you don't trust anymore because the information environment has been it's not even federal versus state anymore. It's basically you are in a tribe that supersedes all of that. That's been created by this culture. It's a culture that you're a part of. And yeah, I feel like it's superseded all
I,
levels of government.
So I agree with that, although I do think if you look at polls about trust, they are higher in people have more trust in community institutions that are closer to them. And you're absolutely right that the problem does not go away if you snap your fingers and say, remember that we're federalists. But um, it does mitigate things to say, hey, we need to do a lot at more local levels, where people are more, not binary, yes, but more capable of talking to each other about more things. And you're right, the problem doesn't go away because of an information environment that's really seeking to separate us. But I do think it is less acute the more local you get.
I don't think the information environment causes this. I think people within ecosystems do this. People who have interests in galvanizing people towards a particular worldview for their own power and end. And at the same time, I think, again, this is why we have to take a systemic perspective, because it isn't just top down and it isn't just bottom up. These things are complex and they interact with each other. And so you can't just expect people to come along by talking down to them. And also, you can't just expect them to organically work from ground up. I mean, you have to look at how these things interoperate. So I think Ben is right in that approach.
We will always err on ending the show on a so I think Ben is right about comment. And I am, that's whenever somebody says that, I think, oh, there's 40 seconds left in the show. I can monologue about a Ben is right comment for that amount of time, and we can go
Finish
out.
always saying Ben is wrong.
No, 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 no. That is not a substantive point that you've made. Alicia had the last
Alicia has a
substantive
call.
point of
Bye.
Oh, Alicia has the last substantive point of the day. We're going to leave it there, folks. We're going to be back tomorrow. I don't know who the hosts are going to be. I don't know who the guests are going to be, but you'll be there and I'll be there, and it's going to be freaking fabulous. See you later.